all of the software is available on the Nutcracker site. So first, let's start with how many of you used xLights last season? Okay. And how many of you are brand new and have never used it but are thinking about using it this year? Cool. And how many of you use lore to sequence? A lot less than I would have thought. How about HLS? Okay. How about LSP?
Try.
Okay. And how about Vixen 2? How about Vixen 3? What did I miss? That's it. Oh, and how many used xLights last year to sequence? Anybody? Exclusively only used xLights. So, some history about xLights. xLights was created 5 years ago by Matt Brown. Matt Brown is a big lore user, and he created the software so that you'd have a scheduler for lore that had no lag. Matt Brown is a really quiet-spoken guy and an amazing talent. I met Matt in 2012. That was the first year I did lights, and we kind of got together as a bromance, that kind of thing. In 2012 was the first year that I did Christmas lights. In 2011 was Mr. Christmas for 10 years. And in 2012, I decided to find out what this RGB light stuff was. And I wrote the first Nutcracker 1 and the Nutcracker 2 in that year, 2012. It was a PHP web-based program, and it introduced some concepts that hadn't apparently been tried before, like create an effect, drop it on a model, doesn't matter what the kind of the model is. Abstract your sequence from the actual things you're putting it on. I ran in 2012. I had 7 people in a room back then. At the end of 2012, Matt contacted me and asked if it was okay if he ported my code, which is web-based, into xLights. And I go, sure. It took him about 2 weeks, and he ported it, and the result was an effect that I was taking 5 minutes to generate, he generated in 50 milliseconds. So I was blown away. I went to forums. I said, this is absolutely amazing. And people didn't respond like I thought they would go like, wow. So if you see Matt, come up to him and say, wow, because it was a big deal. And the core of xLights is why the software scales to nearly 200,000 channels in generating effects. That was way back. Matt laid that foundation for us. So in 2013, by the way, when we did this join, I had users. This community is really weird.
You got a mic?
We had.
Can we give you a mic?
Is that better? Is that better? Now who's the psychos in this group 2 years ago? I had some people who ranted, why is xLights contaminating Nutcracker? And what happened to their Nutcracker? And what is this xLights crap? And why is it there? So back then, we started referring to it as xLights/Nutcracker because people were confused. And the reason there's still 2 names is they were confused why the 2 programs somehow became one. So to be clear, Nutcracker was put inside of xLights. Everything we do is based on xLights. I still refer to Nutcracker, my original software, but it is what Matt did. He rewrote everything I had, 5,000 lines. So all through 2013, we had version 3 of xLights Nutcracker, scaled, and it works. In that year, June, at the Academy, the other Texas thing, Dave Pitts, is he here? Guys, ghost. Dave came to me in June and showed the Falcon pipe layer. And some of you may have seen a post in 2012 when I said the most amazing thing I have ever seen is the Falcon pipe layer. still is an amazing show player. Dave, in 2013, in November, I talked to him about a concept of changing xLights from a Excel-based grid, models this way, timing marks this way, to a GUI. Put a waveform, put effects horizontally, and it'll look like a video editor. Dave goes, oh yeah, I can do that. And like in a week, he had this prototype, and because he did that, we were then able to step up and go to the next stage. And the next stage was Dave leaving to go design his newest hardware card, and two really skilled programmers, Dan Culp, who had been helping kind of part-time for a couple of years, but he really committed, and the other was Gil Jones. Is Gil here? No? Those two guys are core to the success of what xLights 4 became.
Watch still there.
I like all of you guys that are worried that I'm going to trip. I was captain of the gymnastic team, and I will only trip all the time. So here's the dev team. For this year, the people in green have done development, and the people in blue are actually writing the code. Since we released xLights 4 beta in March, as of this week, there have been 41 releases. 41 releases of code, and that's because of the two blue guys. Chris Pinkham, also known as Captain Murdoch, is the Falcon Pi. And the reason he's on my side of the team is he's what makes sure there's a Linux version of xLights. I think we're one of the only sequencers that offers native Mac, native Linux, and native Windows sequencer software. So Gil Jones and Dan Culp, they add new stuff, and when it gets enough, I release it. And I like the fact they do the work, and people thank me. It happens all the time. So some questions I get asked, is xLights free? It has always been free. There is no plans to monetize it. It will continue to be free. It's open sourced. And what that matters to you is if I were to go away, xLights continues. Like HLS is supported, which is a great sequencer, HLS and Joe Hinkle. But he does not open source his software, and there's only one developer. If he leaves, the sequencer stops. And I've told people that the biggest investment all of you make is learning a sequencer. We discount it as programmers way too much. You want to make it so when you're sequencing it, you don't spend time thinking how to do it. You get your vision artistically of what you want to do, and you just do it. It will take you an investment in whatever sequencer you pick. Lore, great sequencer. And so if we come and show you some stuff, you go, I really like that new whiz-bang stuff, but you're going to have to learn something new. The one good thing about xLights, it's been true now for 4 years, is it's continuously being developed, and now the team is getting larger. We don't plan on charging anything for it. Why have there been 46 releases since March? I have a different philosophy than some of the people doing software releases. You do 1 or 2 releases a year, and they're the production release. Behind that is testing, and you don't get to see them as a user until finally they do the release. In order to alleviate the problem of training you, we've been releasing a lot of releases. So I've been calling it the alpha, beta, and production release. The alpha release is when you have a car with no engine. You can push it and it might go, you can open the door, but it's not running. We had an alpha release in January, and we let some people come in and use it. It not only was crashing, you could not sequence your song in the alpha release. It wasn't complete. Beta release, the car now has an engine, and mostly it'll get you to your destination. There are people right now who have finished sequencing songs for Christmas using xLights 4. So it has reached the state that it mostly works. The crashes are more infrequent, and you get to try it and learn all these new things that are coming out. A production release, and these are my definition, is the main point is it won't crash when any of you use it. There may still be bugs in it, but they will be minor bugs that you can work around, not a major blocker. I can't get my show out as not a production release. I was hoping we'd have production release this week. I wanted to make the big announcement, but there is still enough bugs that can crash your system. There are people like I've been using it and haven't had a crash in a month. but then I don't do what you guys do. And the reason we have so many beta users is you get to kick the tires, and if you find a crash, then you raise them, and then we go to try to address them. I'm expecting now that we'll have production release at end of August or September at the rate we're going. Again, you can sequence your songs now for Halloween. But if you don't want to be on a sequencer that was working last week and you get the new release and then you try something and it crashes, wait till September. But then you will lose the chance of getting trained on something that's brand new. And another reason we do so many releases is you'll look at the release notes and there's 10 things that come out. You want to learn those. And if I gave you all of the release notes since March, it's nearly 20 pages long. If you tried to learn all that, it just would be large. Not everyone does it this way, but that's why there's alpha, beta, production. We are currently in beta. We are far along in beta, but it's not production. These are the sequencers most of you are using. Lore has an excellent sequencer. Lore hired away our key programmer, Matt Brown, a year ago, and I really enjoyed that. But it was best for the sequencing community. And he really made what they got. They bought a copy of xLights so they could incorporate it. That's what the pixel editor. And then Matt was showing it me today. He's taken it way beyond what our initial xLights 3 was. Great stuff. LSP, one of the leaders of things like a whole house model, but they haven't made a release in a couple of years and they're going through some challenges. Again, you invested a lot of time learning it. Sorry. But you can sequence your show. There are people who decide we'll just do it again. HLS, that's Joe Hinkle's sequencer, very fast. To me, it feels a little awkward using the interface, but once you learn it, people swear by it. Vixen 2.1 and Vixen 2.5 and Vixen Plus. It's been a rock solid sequencer for a long time, not super geared for RGB and maybe not for high channel counts. Vixen 3 has a GUI interface, great interface. I'm not sure how high their channel count goes in sequencing. I haven't seen people do 50,000, 100,000 channel shows. But if you're down in like 5,000 channels, any of these would work. Then you want to pick the one that's most comfortable fit for you for learning to sequence. xLights 4, which is I'm going to show, we'll talk about. And then Matrix is the commercial software, usually done for like discos and DJs and stuff. It's like $500 for a universe to $5,000, commercial grade stuff. Has a lot of cool effects in it, but it's not exactly matched to what we do. You don't get a preview of your house like what we do. You can trigger effects with it. I only mentioned this in Light Factory. There's some commercial grade sequencers that is not highly used, but some of you are in fact using them. I've been asked what xLights is. Initially in 2012, it was to go generate effects on a megatree. One model, put a spiral, put text. That was its goal. And its goal was to produce an output file that you would bring into Lore and bring into Vixen, and then you get this RGB stuff. 2012. There are still some people who think that's still what we are. We've gone beyond that, especially in the last year. xLights can sequence AC. There are some people who this year are only sequencing AC and no RGB, and they're only using xLights. So if you come to the room, you may have passed the Falcon xLights room, come and see us and we'll show you how to do that. We have some new stuff that makes that easier than what it was in the past year. I think we're the only sequencer that runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac natively, and there's versions. I verified the 4.1.11 release just came out 2 days ago when I posted it. And all of the controller types that we currently support in xLights and the Falcon Pi player is Renard, Lore, that's USB Lore. You can take your USB dongle and plug it into xLights. You do not need to convert it to DMX to run it in xLights, or you can plug it into the Falcon Pi player. You do not need to convert it to DMX to run. If you want to get higher channel counts, it's suggested that you convert your Lore protocols into DMX. We support PixelNet, D-Lights, and E131. So this is beginning xLights for all you guys who have already sequenced last year. But I wanted to tell you what I think the order is that you would go about using this if you have never used it before. It's very important, if you came to talk to me, that you've thought out kind of what you want your house to look like. I would suggest that you get a rough list of models. Our term for a megatree and an arch is a model. It's also called a display element or a prop. I think LSP calls them controllers. So whatever you call it, megatree, arch, candy canes, how many of those do you think you're going to have? And you do not need to get this exact at all. Just get a rough idea. And for each one of those models, you should have an idea of the channel range. Are you going to build your lights out of single channel lights? And let's try it. How many of you are only AC lights? This is decreasing over time. And how many are only RGB and nothing else? And how many are a mix of AC and RG and dumb RGB? Okay. I, by the way, have 16 channels of AC and 24,000 channels of RGB. So if you want to know the slant of xLights, it's always been for doing these complicated effects on RGB. And at this time, I tell the story to help keep me humble, which is hard to do. I hand out 2,000 candy canes each winter to all the people who watch my show, and I ask every one of them, what do you like about my show? And the number one answer is Virtual Santa. And they go, that comes to the top. And number two is the snowfall tubes I bought from eBay for $2 each, that I turn on the beginning of the show and never turn off. And number three is my megatree that I spent a whole year sequencing. So I only make it to number 3 when I do all this fancy stuff. So what I take away from that is, look at it from your audience's eyes. I may not be satisfied with the timing and things I've changed. The other two is when I put Frozen on the garage door, that made number 3 and pushed me down to 4. And then I have a mailbox from Home Depot with the letter that comes out to Santa, and the kids like that one. So I only get to be 3rd or 4th with all this work. Besides getting the channels, and I have a spreadsheet to help you calculate this. I've posted it. If you come, I'll give you a copy in the room. I would take a picture of your house and roughly draw out where you think you're going to put the objects. And I'll state again, you do not need to be exact. You just roughly set it out like you think it'll be, because it's very easy to move things around. And because our sequencing is independent of the models, I'll give you an example. I'm going to sequence my house in all Renard AC channels with whatever controller produces AC, or a Lynx Express. And I got candy canes, and I got Reese, and I finished. And now I'm going to change them all into RGB. I do not need to redo my sequence. It will work. Changing all the models type out. And I'll show you that here, and I'll show it in the advanced class more. By the way, if there's questions, you can be sure to raise your hand. The software is at this address. Since I post in 47,000 forums and stuff, you see me everywhere. There's the Nutcracker forum, which is nutcracker123.com/forum. I didn't put the link here, but that's our forum. If you go on Facebook, search for xLights, and you'll find the Facebook group. It's probably one of the most active. And the latest software is always on this link that you see here, releases. So to get started, assuming you already have this pre-work done, you have your models and you have your picture of your house, the first thing that we're going to do is, after installing the software, we're going to create the models. After we create the models, we're going to create a new sequence that we're going to add models to the view. Then we're going to drop effects on the models, and then we're going to save the sequence. All right, so let's go into xLights. So the first thing you're going to do is go into the Setup tab. You always do that first. You usually have to only do it once. Thank you, Mark. Just keep your head down. You're going to get in the video otherwise. In xLights, you set a directory for where you're going to store your sequences. In lore, it's where the LMS, I think your subdirectory is called sequences or something like that. And then you can also have a directory where you store your audio files. And in lore, I think it's a separate directory. I like to make them both in the same place. And Gil's here. Gil's in the back, standing up, wave, the smiley face. The reason you're going to see a lot of effects, and Gil is teaching the advanced effects class on Saturday, is because of Gil's work. So Gil, because he doesn't like to have two different directories pointing at different places, he gave us the ability to, if you click that, you only have to set one of them and the other one will track. I happen to keep my audio files in the same directory as the show. You're going to go and define the setup. You come in, if you have lore, you would come here and say add USB lore, USB DMX, USB PixelNet, USB Renard, and then you set the baud rates and the other information. And if you have E131, which is PixLight, AlphaPix, E682, J1Sys, P12Rs, or any of the Falcon controllers, you would use at E131. On all of them except for Falcon, I believe you put 510 here. And if you're on Falcon controllers, you put 512. You get to pick whether they're multicast or unicast. And what will happen is you will see the USB appear at the top, or the E131. You can click on any one of these rows and then you can move them up and down to change their position using these arrows. Our setup is different than some of the sequencers. What you are doing here is creating a pile of channels. We don't actually care what kind of controller you have. I could come here and define 30,000 channels of Renard, completely finish sequencing and see what it looks like in xLights, and then come back and change it to E131, and I do not touch anything in the sequence. The setup is totally separate from the sequencer part. Our models are independent of the hardware you have. Our sequences are independent of what you put into the model. This model is a 10-string megatree, it's a 100-string megatree. You still say put a spiral on it. You can come back and change the model and change its topography. Someone shares a sequence with you and then you have a different size. You just change the model, but you don't change the sequence. And then from the model, we're independent from the hardware. You say, I have this model called megatree, and then you come in here, we follow what's this, and you can change it. So you can change from USB lore and then make it E131, but you don't change the other stuff. The main thing we use from this is to define a block of channels, because we allocate memory. I think lore calls it the intensity files. xLights has called it the XSEQ file since 2010. So for 5 years, we've had a binary file, fully rendered data, sitting there. And what happens when you play is it grabs a chunk of memory and it just pumps it out. It doesn't try to interpret it. It doesn't do anything. Just grab and pump, grab and pump. Because of that architecture, thanks to Matt Brown, it scales to very high channel counts. It's the way the Pi player works. It grabs a chunk of memory and sends it out, which is why the current Falcon Pi player can drive 80,000 channels per Raspberry Pi. And you can have 1 million Raspberry Pis and have 1.3 trillion channels if you want, one master and 16 million slaves. You can have 16 million video projectors, every one synced to within one frame while it's playing. And the Raspberry Pi can be in any country and it'll play. You can put a Raspberry Pi at your parents and your brothers. You start it and all of them would run. So the Raspberry Pi still is the most amazing thing I've seen. After we've done the setup, You only have to really do this once, but we need that pile of channels to get started. Now you can come over to the test tab, and here you can go and highlight a channel, and we have to actually say that we're going to output a light, and there should be a light turning on. Go background color and turn these on. So this matrix, it didn't turn on.
Yeah, there's one.
No, who's an idiot? All right. This is 128 lights across and 80 rows. So who could tell me the channel number of the first light on the second row? No, it's
361.
128 times 3 plus 1 is correct, 385. So that's what we were all thinking. So let's verify if I come to 385. If I turn it on, the red light ought to turn on in the second row. And then if you wondered if you got the red, green, blue, blue, green, red, all that 7 acronym soup, try turning on the second one and it ought to be green if it was configured correctly, and then turn on the third one if you want it to be blue. So if you've built the models, this is an easy way to go verify that you have got them set up correctly. It's the test screen. You can turn them all on, and you can cycle it through doing this testing. So catatonic shock, epileptics, don't watch. You have the ability to check a few of these, and suppose you have 100 channels that were your candy canes. You could check them, click save, make a name. And then in the future, you do load, and it will load pre-checked that particular model. So if you have 30,000 channels, but you want to only check one thing, you can go ahead and save the range here, load it in, and then when you run the test patterns, it only goes to that model. Anyway, that's what the load and save is. The convert tab, we probably have the most conversions of anybody, and that we support all those sequencers I showed you, we support every one of them. And by the way, I don't think anybody supports our output, but we support everybody else's. Power to the people. You get to pick one of these as an input file, and then you can pick one of these as an output file. And then if you're lower, you get to pick some other stuff, and you can change the timing, and then you convert, and that file becomes this file. This is very powerful, allows you to get from Vixen to HLS, and HLS to LSP, and stuff like that. The scheduler, remember the reason xLights was written 5 years ago is to be a scheduler. This is its bread and butter. You would define a playlist. You can have movie files, you can have sound files, you can have sequence intensity files, and you can schedule them, you can make them repeat, you can pick one that starts at the beginning, you can play RDS, and you can have system commands that are launched. Now, this stuff all, I think originally only worked on Windows because it's a basic program. We have not touched this code in probably 4 or 5 years. It works, there's no open bugs on it. We're not enhancing it. In 2012, I used this to run my show. In 2013, I used the Falcon Pi Player. 2014, the Falcon Pi Player has a lot more capability than this, and it scales higher. But there are people who are running the shows, or people are running with the scheduler. The Papagayo tab, I'll talk about on Saturday, how to take a Papagayo file and get it to create a sequence where whether you have a coral face, or if you want to provide your own 10 image files, and we flip the images on your matrix for you. And then you come to the tab that you care about. The sequencer tab is new. It wasn't there last year. What was in its place was that that Excel looking thing, that's gone. And the whole core of xLights 4 has been rewritten from the ground up. I don't think anything's left of the original one. So I talked about you want to make models. So there's a button here for defining the models. And let's make a, let's see, what do I have as a choice? Let's make an arch. Because I'm going to show you what it takes to make the arch as a single channel lights, as a dumb RGB lights, and as a smart RGB lights, and show you how you could change your model type just here and not have to change your sequence file. So I'll give this a name. The display as, I'm going to say this twice so that it's clear, I get confusion. In xLights, we don't care about any of this stuff you see here. We don't generate effects based on whether it's a megatree or an arch or a star or a circle. All of the effects in xLights are generated against a matrix. So if you have a single string of 1 times 50, that's a matrix that's 1 by 50. If you have a megatree that's 10 by 50, it draws it like a tree, but it generates the effect just on a square matrix. If you then change that to be a matrix that's vertical, it still generates it on that square matrix. And because of that innate architecture, the stuff we generate will display on every display element shown here, which is why sequences you share are model independent. You're going to say, go make a spiral, and then we'll show you that it's a single. I'll give you an example. I have a matrix and I say, Merry Christmas. So it's a 10 by 50 and you see the text. Then I change the model to be an arch and it displays Merry Christmas on one line. It's still doing that. You just can't interpret it as the lines go by. It works, it's not very useful. So the display as is to help you in your preview to see what it's going to look like, but it doesn't change how we generate the effects. We generate all the effects on just this one square matrix. And we have Reese and all this stuff. But I said we're doing an arch. Okay, so we're going to do an arch. Type of string. You can have RGB, GBR, and all these types. What is our recommendation? Do not pick these other choices. Let your controller do it. Always pick RGB and assume that it's going to be a red, green, blue. And if you're going to change string types, do it in the controller. Because if you do change the string and you pick another one, you don't have to come back to xLights, you don't have to change the show that plays. You just go to the controller and make sure that it responds to red, green, blue. If you have controllers that will not do red, green, blue, BGR and all the others, then yeah, you can pick it here, but it works. There's just some extra maintenance. Whatever you want, dumb RGB, then you pick 3-channel RGB. Now notice, let me get the number of arches. I'm going to use 8 arches. The number of nodes per arch is like the logical light is going to be 1 logical light. And when I draw it in the preview, I'll draw it with 50 lights. So notice over here that the first arch is using 3 channels, like it should. It may have 50 lights when we draw it in the preview, but it's only going to use 3 channels. If we had said that it's going to be a 4-channel display item, say it's a flood, there are some lights now that are red, green, blue, white. I know the DLA flood had actually 2 LEDs in it, a red, green, blue, or separate red, green, blue, and then they had a white one because it was a pure white. And that particular object used 4 channels, and it better, did I not select it? It should have used 4 channels per string. And then we set the start channel. What if I want to say that it's a single channel? The arch is twisted with red lights, It is 50 lights for display purpose, but it is only using one display element, and then we say that each of those are using one channel. If I were sequencing to something called arches, I don't change the sequence. I'm only changing how the model is laid out. If I wanted to take the arches because they were 3 and now I want to make them 20, I do not change the sequence at all. I just change the model. So you see the power of you can change the model around or reconfigure it. It doesn't affect your sequence.
Upgrade your arches from old school LED to RGB.
Now when you do that, how many actual nodes are there in an arch? If it's RGB, every light is an individual node. So you have to change this to, if I were to say that there were 50 lights on it, and how many are there lights per node? This is for 2811s, where it's 3 lights for each channel. If you wanted to make, this is all for drawing purposes, it doesn't affect our generation, but you want to make sure it uses 3 lights on the display because the 2811 lights up 3 lights. The 12-volt 2011 right lights them up in 3. So now if I do this, I got 8 arches and I'm using 50 nodes. How many channels is 50 nodes? 150 channels. So this should be showing 150 per arch. All this change was done at the model level. And this gets easier if you will come with that list with some basic ideas of what your display elements are. If you come in and go, I'd like to start from scratch, then I'll probably pass you on to Steve Geron or to Gil. They're happy to do that. No, we'll help you, but be aware that they told us they only thought there'd be 5 to 10 people in our room, and they gave us a really small room. So we're here to help you, and for the rest of today and then tomorrow and on Saturday, you can come in for one-on-one help. Come into our room and say you want to start, and we'll take you from the beginning and take you through a sequence. Bring a sound file in Saturday's session, and then tomorrow's session in my room, we'll go over how to mark up songs using Audacity. Okay, so we built 3 different kinds of models. I guess I should give it a name. Really original. Gotta put on glasses now, I can't see what I'm doing. All right, we defined some models. The next thing you would do is go into your layout. This thing is, that's that, because it's 30,000 channels. If you look at it, you'll see that it is actually a lot of lights. And when we crunch it down, it's just one solid block. Okay, I'm going to show you that the models you created are going to show up. There are sizing boxes, and you move them to where you want them to be in your yard. This is a picture of my house. I forgot it, so I went to Google Maps and did Street View and did a screen capture. And then I went into Paint and I erased the tree that was in my front yard so it wouldn't be in the way. And I used to be here, I erased me, because it was October 31st when Google went by and I was putting up Halloween. So I'm in front with this stupid look like, what? Was that really a Google truck?
We're all going to be like, what
Yeah. Yeah, well, I show my address lots of places. All right, so if you are in here in the layout screen, you pick one of the objects that you have. You can either move it by dragging. You can also size it bigger. You can rotate it when it's things that like eaves. So when you're going to draw your eaves, draw them as single lines. Back there was a display type. And suppose that you have a light that goes down this eave, over this eave, and up. You can't, even though that's one string, it says suppose it's 120 lights, create it as 3 different models. String 1, string 2, string 3, because each line you can rotate it and make it exactly match. And if you make the starting grasses be 1 to 120, 121 to 3, 240, 241 to 360, everything works exactly like it should, but that allows you to rotate the segments onto the model display, or the layout display. Once you've done the initial layout, and if you're good, it'll be the final layout, you won't touch this again for the rest of the year. You've done the foundation. Now we're ready to sequence a song. What am I doing? Yeah, I talk too much. All right. We're going to create a song, and we come up here to the New Sequence tab. Let's make sure I set that. And I don't need the sequence. You get two choices. Just like lore, you can get a music sequence or an animation. Let's click music sequence. Carol the Bells MP3 is the file. All my songs come from Amazon, so this is a 256K bit variable bit rate sampled file. And in our software, we're using a WX widgets library that says position forward to 10 seconds, and it doesn't. If it's a variable bit rate, we tell it to go to 10, and it goes to 9.2. And it would be very frustrating to you if you're clicking someplace in the song, and when you press play, it doesn't start there. It'll work, and it'll be correct if you start at the beginning of the song, but if you try to click and start places, it'll drive you nuts. So, go into Audacity, open this file, and just say export audio, and take all the defaults. It takes less than 5 seconds, and it will convert by default into 192 kbit constant bitrate sampled sound file. And when it's a constant bitrate sampled file, it will position exactly correctly. I have tried 144, I've tried 122, they all work the same. The reason I use 192 is that's the default, and I don't have to change anything. I just say, open the file, export audio, click, and I'm done. And I rename it. So I'm going to take the 192 file as the sound file. And then you come to a prompt that used to just say 25, 50, and 100, and people were confused that this had something to do with the timing grid. This has nothing to do with the timing grid, this prompt. It is saying, what is the minimum time discriminator we will use when we're creating your sequence? You can never be faster than this in our sequences. The default in all of the Nutcrackers 1, 2, and 3 was 50. There was no other choice. In xLights 4, we expanded this to give more choices. We potentially could allow this to be a variable number in the future, but we don't think so. So why would you use 40 frames per second? There are people who claim that when you do a long fade, and the people, yeah, that's me. When you're doing a long fade, you can detect 40 steps down, or it's smoother with 40 steps down in intensity than in 1 second doing 20 steps down or 10 steps down. So if you pick 40, you will get smoother fades. Also, if you're doing singing trees, say that again?
The bigger file sizes?
It doubles the file size. So we have a saying in Six Sigma, which is you always introduce a defect when you solve one, you always do. And the defect here is you're going to make not only bigger file sizes, but you're going to make the save times longer to render. So if you get 50,000 channels and you're doing 40 frames per second, so you want to calculate 50,000 channels 40 times per second in our software. And then you want to do that when you're going to do a 3-minute song, the saving times and the loading times will be longer too. The other reason you do 40 is if you have singing faces and you really notice that the lip sync is not right on. A normal audio is 24 or 30 frames per second. At 20, you might notice it looks like the lip sync's a little bit off. I do not notice. And remember the rule number 1? What was the number 1 thing? Virtual Santa, snowfall tubes. The last part is doing my stuff doesn't get noticed. Okay, so I usually, for me, use 20. This is not timing marks. This is how we divide it into the chunks. You do this once, and I don't think, is it easy, Gil, to change it once it's made 20? Can they make it 40? Yeah, so I don't think we ever made an easy way to convert it once it's there. And by the way, this whole screen you're going through is thanks to Gil. He wrote the whole thing. Great job. And he's put all this kind of visual thing here so you can decide. We're creating a sequence. We gave it a sound file. We said we're going to do 20 frames per second. Now we need to say, do you want to bring any existing data into this particular sequence? I already sequenced Wizards of Winter last year in LSP or in Vixen. Here's where I get to bring it in. I don't use any of these. I just sequence in xLights, so I would skip this part. Come to us if you have some files to import. Come into our room and we'll walk you through this process because there's more steps, and I'm almost done. Okay, when we get done, you have now brought in the file. The next thing you need to do is add display elements. You have a sound file, but suppose you have 100 models, but you created some extra dummy models. You don't want all of them. You have to come and add the display elements that you want to have. There's no way to do this in 45 minutes. All right, we need to get some timing marks. So I could come up here and press the letter T and it'll put some timing marks on the song. Or I'm hitting the letter T as it plays. Let's zoom in and see how coordinated I am. So I could see whether or not I was hitting the waveform. Having the waveform can help you tweak. No, I'm good.
And humble.
Up here are all the effects. We have 34 you can choose from. Let's start on the matrix. And when I put it on, this is one of the things that is amazing to me is you can drop it, and because I have output to lights, you see it immediately on your lights, 30,000 channels. So this is a big display, and you can see that it's calculating on the fly 20 times a second, 30,000 channels. So you're getting 6 million updates here per second. If you go to the effect window, you can do things like I want to use the palette colors, and down here I have red, green, and blue. So as I change those colors, notice instantaneous changes on your lights and on the display here. If you don't have a display yet, you haven't bought any of the lights, you can completely sequence your entire Christmas show now, see what it looks like here, and see what it looks like. Let's see if I can do it without it going away. See what it looks like on my house. If I decided that I needed to change something in my layout, and I put the mega tree over there, and I go back to the sequencer, I go back to the whole house display, which is behind. Instantaneously, the whole house display updates in real time as you move the objects around. This is a big deal. I mean, it's like, wow. And I didn't write this. Okay, I'm just a user of this code. All right, you would continue to fill in all of the effects in your grid. Let's get rid of that. And you would just come, for any one effect, we allow at least 200 effect layers. So you can come here and add another effect layer. Seeing these for now. Okay. And I'm going to put circles below the butterfly, and then I have to come and change the layering. Let's put fire on the top, and then let's put spirals down below that. 3 effects, all layered together in real time being generated, and you can have 200 of these layers. And they get generated in real time, and I have no idea the amount of combinations. Yes?
Sean, when you were showing the picture of the house, you put these effects on the matrix, but if you're doing it on everything that was shown.
That's because in my matrix, my models, I started them all at channel 1.
Oh, okay.
what you're supposed to do is make sure you don't overlap channels, and I didn't do that. So don't do that. Don't make all your models start the same channel, or you're going to change one thing and the whole house changes. Okay, and when you're all done, you can, let's see how well the timing works. Let's put some other effects in here for the timing marks. And what we can see is when I press play, so it's marking, I got the downbeat wrong, so I'll fix it. This should be over here, this one should be over here. You just have to change, and by the way, 200 effects, they don't have to line up. And at one time frame for 5 seconds, you can make every effect start in a different place. Talk about crazy. I'll just leave it like that. Okay, so if you come and play, let's see if I can click it. So what you saw is the transitions were dead on. And if they weren't dead on, I can zoom farther and take a look at the timing marks that I have. This is all new in 4, and see I'm a little bit off on this timing mark. And what is stepping? Notice how it's jumping? That's 50 milliseconds. So I could decide which 50 milliseconds do I want. You can be dead on. The last thing you do is you press save. Your file is saved. You could then output directly to Lights. It saves it as an FSEQ file, and the FSEQ file is what you send to the Raspberry Pi if it's your show player. So I think I'm about 45 minutes. Are there questions? Yes?
Real quick question. With the layers, can you adjust the intensity of each layer? So for example, if I have a background that I want to play like full brightness for 5 seconds, and I want to bring that level down and scroll text across it, can you do that?
The question is, in one effect, and you have multiple layers, can you change the brightness value of each one of those layers? And the answer is yes, because every layer could have a separate ramp. The first one could be a color wash that ramps up. The second layer, starting at half a second, could be a different thing that ramps down. The third one could be a butterfly, and you're going to go up and then go down. They all mix together. And what I didn't show you is that the mixing, right now it's taking one default mixing. We have 12 different ways of mixing the layers. How about 200 layers with 12 mixing choices between them? It'd be crazy. I don't do more than like 3, but it does support hundreds of them. Other questions? Yes?
When you're selecting your models, the program, is there a way to set a group of them so when you start the next sequence, you could just select that group and all the models populate in automatically? Or?
Yes. Come to our room. Yes?
Written there somewhere, one little thing just to get it right, or, yeah.
Let's see if I got it. The question was, is there a grid? And I don't know if we have the edit display elements and go to the matrix. Is it here, Gil, to get to the individual strands of the matrix?
Double click on it. Go close that out and double close that. Double click on it.
Oh, there you go. And now for each strand that's in the megatree, you can put a different effect. So you could go and have a color wash and then decide you're going to put an effect on the third strand. This is the way we were doing it like 6 months ago, but now with the new effect class that Gil made, the morph, and you can do skips on the strands and stuff. If you come to his class on Saturday, you're going to see things you can do that, although you can do amazing things by doing this, you get to edit on the individual strands of the megatree, but like superstar effects, where they come up and do that wave, we have another effect class for doing that Gil created, and that is the primary thing he'll talk about on Saturday. Did I answer the question, Dave? Yes?
Is the video of this and the other ones, will there be a video? And
I will redo this tutorial, but Laura's offering a class for their software, 2 days, 14 hours, right? In 45 minutes, I can't even give you touch the top of the features that are here. I just want to give you a feeling of, if you want to get started, get a picture of your house, kind of draw out your models, have the channel ranges, make sure you don't overlap the channel ranges. If you come and see us, we could type that in like 5 or 10 minutes, and then you'll be generating, and we'll pick a sound file if you don't have one. You can be generating a sequence within 10 or 15 minutes. Any other questions? Okay, I want to thank Steve and Gil and Captain Murdoch, who's in the other room, and Dave Pitts, who is the reason we have an xLights 4. If he hadn't done it in last November, it wouldn't be here. And so for all of my team and for all of you, thank you for coming, and drop by our room when you have a chance.